Remember about a week ago after Mark Miller, the newly appointed Mark Miller, now, of course, taking over from Stephen Guilbeault and dealing with the Quebec file, if you will, came out and talked about the French factor in Quebec and, you know, that we shouldn't be politicizing this whole idea of French being in decline, which is something, of course, the CAQ and the PQ just hammer after time after time after time. Well, when Mark Miller said that, I'm pretty sure he didn't really at the time consider the firestorm he might be starting, because this is how Premier Legault reacted to Mark Miller having said that same day.
Là, Mark Miller, le nouveau ministre fédéral de la Culture, vient dire qu'il est tanné du débat sur le déclin du français. Quelle honte! Mark Miller, là, c'est une honte pour tous les Québécois. Je ne sais pas comment il va faire pour se présenter dans une activité culturelle au Québec après avoir dit des conneries comme ça.
Whoa. Wow. You don't hear François Legault kind of get that angry. But that was nothing compared to what Paul St-Pierre Plamondon did next, which is call out cultural communities here in Quebec, who went ahead and said, hey, congratulations to Mark Miller. After all, he will be the guy handing out the checks federally, right, to Quebec groups, organizations, culturally. You'd think that would be the exact thing they would do, and that kind of blew Paul St-Pierre Plamondon's head off. Robert Libman wrote about this in a Gazette piece the other day, and he's on the line. Robert, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Aaron.
Can you remember a time when, because I think this had died down for a while, at least I had that impression, then all of a sudden Mark Miller comes along, says this, which I think to most of us, I don't know, did you recognize at the time, as soon as he had said it, that he was walking into a minefield?
Well, my reaction to the reaction was franchement. Like, this is really over the top. And you know, if you look at the clip of Mark Miller, he was being hounded by a journalist. It's not something he decided one day to come out with himself. He was hounded by a journalist just shortly after being named Minister of Canadian Culture and Heritage. And he was culture and identity. He was hounded by this journalist that asked him about the decline of French in Quebec, and he was very careful. His response was very measured. He said that it's important to protect the French language. Yes, there has been a decline, but there have been great gains that have been made through the French Language Charter and the Canada-Quebec Accord on Immigration, etc. So he was very, very careful. But then he added, sideways almost, he responded that the issue is complex and it shouldn't be politicized. Boom! That's when everything blew up. Obviously, you played the reaction of François Legault, which is very much over the top, and of course, PSPP, the leader of the PQ, went after him also. Went after him also, but he also really went nuts over the cultural milieu in Quebec, because they naturally congratulated the new minister, who was their minister responsible in the federal government. So he really went off on them, calling them vacuous, intellectually empty-headed, disloyal to Quebec, groveling, and that he was ashamed. And, you know, come on.
He's had to walk that, by the way, back, right? He walked it back to some degree anyway when he went on Tout le monde en parle and got called out for that. And you wonder if that damage has been done, because, you know, when you're ahead, as the PQ has been now for the last little while in all the polling, the idea is to stay out of the limelight, not get in it, right?
Yeah, of course, but it's showing us a side of PSPP that many people haven't seen yet, that he's got a bit of a thin skin, that he's a little bit reactionary. He felt that he had to go on, and he was pressed by Guy Lepage, who's the host of Tout le monde en parle, which, of course, is one of the most popular TV shows in Quebec, and it's also a Radio-Canada TV show, so it's under a federal crown corporation. So he was pressed, and he felt, obviously, that here was his opportunity to perhaps walk his words back a little bit, because many in the cultural milieu have been strongly supportive of the PQ over the years and independence. So he recognized the fact that maybe he had to soften the blow, but he still doubled down on his insinuation that if you're getting money from the federal government, you obviously have to take a certain position, whatever that means, which is, according to him, somewhat disloyal to Quebec, whatever that means. And Guy Lepage, to his credit, who is the host of the show, and he's known as a supporter of independence, he really challenged PSPP quite vigorously. He said to him that our show, despite being under Radio-Canada's umbrella, has never, ever felt any influence or inclination from the federal government or anyone to massage its message or to take a position in any way, shape, or form. And he also criticized PSPP, who had insinuated that Radio-Canada journalists or Radio-Canada journalists would also be influenced in taking perhaps a nuanced position that tilted favorably to federalism, and he castigated PSPP for that, who seemed to be squirming in his chair at that point because he was getting it from Guy Lepage, who's a well-known sovereignist.
Can I ask one other thing, though? That the thing that started this all, right, this idea that French is in decline in Quebec, which is something the Premier always falls back on, makes it seem like it's fact. It's not, in fact, exactly as he says it is, right? There are opinions suggesting otherwise.
Well, it's a false narrative in Quebec, and I got into that in the column, whereas they're constantly picking and choosing which statistics they want to go by to sort of reaffirm that narrative that French is in decline in Quebec. And in fact, what they pick on a number that shows that in the last few years, or between the last two censuses, there was a slight decline in the percentage of Quebecers who speak French at home, and that's a natural decline because of immigration. But at the same time, they failed to mention that the highest percentage of Quebecers ever that can speak French, that's something that tells me that French is not in decline, where more people speak French now than they ever have, because it includes Anglophones and Allophones who come here who can speak French. They may not speak it all the time at home, but at the same time, the strength of the French language is improving in Quebec because more people speak it. And that makes you wonder if perhaps this whole debate is really about the protection of the French language in Quebec, or more about the percentage of old stock francophones in Quebec. If you take their masks off, both Legault and PSPP, I think that's what you'll find more than a real genuine concern for the health of the French language itself.
You know, we're at a situation or at a stage now, so we're basically 10 months away from another provincial election, and it seems that every time something like this comes up, and as I said, it hadn't come up a whole lot, certainly Stephen Guilbeault never brought it up. Did Mark Miller make a mistake in doing this and bringing this up in the first place, knowing that it might cause this kind of reaction?
Well, it caused a bit of a reaction, but it was refreshing to hear the truth for once. You know, we're not used to hearing that very often. So he said that, albeit, I think, in a sideways manner. He didn't necessarily mean to bring it up that explicitly. But at the same time, it offered us exposure to some of the overreaction of PSPP. And even among sovereignists and nationalist Quebecers are starting to question, does he have the mettle to be the Premier of Quebec if he's so thin-skinned, if he reacts like that? Because he turned on his own kind to some degree, the cultural milieu in Quebec, many of whom support sovereignty. So that really sparked a lot of questions in the French media about whether he has the wherewithal to lead this province. So I think from that point of view, maybe this firestorm that Mark Miller created could be beneficial in causing Francophone Quebecers to start questioning.
Imagine that, huh, Robert?
He has it, yep.
A federal minister actually speaking the truth when it comes to the language debate in Quebec.
Yeah, we're not used to it. This
is,
gave us goosebumps to some degree.
Let me ask you one last thing, just really quickly. You know, you were involved in provincial politics. I'm wondering now, as you sit back and look at Pablo Rodriguez sort of, self-imploding here, what do you think has to happen here?
Well, I think the Liberal Party has no choice but to replace him, and he's got to step down. When he suspended Marwell Risky, he said that no one is above the party, and we have to do what's in the best interest of the party. And I think no one would admit right now that if he runs in the next election, they have the snowball's chance in hell to be elected. I think he's got to recognize that. He already had an uphill climb beforehand, being able to conquer the all-important regions to win an election in Quebec. But now with this swirling about, even if he did nothing wrong, the suspicion and doubt will be there and will cling to him. And they really, if they want to have any chance in the next election, which is critical, the stakes are very high, they have to make the right move and they have to have him step down. There's no other choice for the Liberal Party right now than to have Pablo Rodriguez replaced with someone who's at least doesn't have blood on their hands.
We'll leave it at that. Robert, thanks so much. Always appreciate it. Robert Libman, former MNA leader of the Equality Party. And, of course, Gazette columnist. You want to read that column? Was in last weekend's Gazette.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. We're going in depth on football and a lot more. We'll pull back the curtain on life in the pros and dive deeper into the stories making the headlines. No hot takes, no lazy narratives, just real honest conversations. You can watch or listen to Film Never Lies on all the TSN platforms and iHeartRadio app.